All right, Chapter 6, Section 1, Graphing Quadratic Functions. The graph of a quadratic function, x squared plus bx plus c, is called a parabola. Last section, we factored quadratic functions. That's when we did the AC method and two factors of c that add to give you b. We did all that. Now it's coming into where we're going to start graphing these quadratic functions. All right, so this first section, we're going to make a table of values to determine coordinates so that you can graph the following quadratics. All right. Well, first we have f of x equals x squared. What we're going to do is first get our y-intercept. Well, f of x equals x squared. It's kind of one of those things where there's really plus 0x plus 0 if you had it in ax squared plus bx plus c form. That's what it looks like, but you don't have a 0x or 0. So to find our y-intercept, you always plug 0 in to your variables. So if you plugged 0 in for x, you get 0 squared, which gives you 0, 0. All right. From there, you can get that point on the graph. Next, you get your axis of symmetry by doing negative b over 2a. All right, negative b over 2a. Our axis of symmetry is what splits our parabola in half. Okay, and it's also always the x of the vertex. So in this case, the axis of symmetry and x of the vertex are going to be the same. Okay. Then from there, to get y of the vertex, I plug in my axis of symmetry, or at the x value of my vertex, which is actually technically h, and we plug that into our quadratic function, and we get 0, 0. Okay. This is kind of a tough example because you can't see other numbers, but what you're going to do after you get your vertex is you're going to plot the two x values to the right of the vertex and the two x values to the left of the vertex. So, plugged in 1 into my quadratic function, and it gives me 1 squared is 1, so I have the point 1, 1. Next, I'm going to plug in 2, and that gives me 2 squared, which is 4, so I'll have a point at 2, 4, and I'm plotting that point. Then I'm going to plug in negative 1 and negative 2, and negative 1 gives me 1, negative 2 gives me 4, and so I have my parabola. Really, you only have to plug in the 2 points to the right because the 2 points to the left are going to mirror it. Our parabolas are always the right side and left side are always going to mirror each other. So if you figure out half, you're going to be able to get the other half pretty easily without actually having to plug them in. But it's one of those things where if you're more comfortable plugging all 4 points in, then go ahead and plug in all 4 points. All right. Next example, I got 2x squared plus 1. I want to get my y-intercept. I'm plugging 0 in for x, and that gives me 1. So my y-intercept is 0, 1. Next, to get my axis of symmetry, which is also the x value of my vertex, but the symbol is h. Go over that in a little bit. I will do negative b over 2a. Well, in this case, there is no b, so it's 0, so I got negative 0 over 2 times 2, which gives me 0. So again, my axis of symmetry is at 0. So to get my vertex, I'm going to plug 0 in, or to get k of my vertex, or the y value of my vertex, I'm going to plug 0 in for x, which that gives me 1. And from there, that vertex is messed up. It shouldn't be there. Sorry, I made this last year. For some reason, that's not marked right. It should be it. Oh, wait, no, never mind. That is marked right. Sorry. It's 10 o'clock. Losing my mind. All right. Next, I will plug in the x value of 1 into my quadratic function. That gives me 2 times 1 squared plus 1, which gives me 3. So I have a point at 1, 3. Okay. Then I'm going to plug in 2, which that gives me refilling that in. 2 times 2 squared plus 1, that gives me 9. So I'm going to plot my point at 2, 9. So from here, my left side is going to mirror the right side. So I know negative 1 is going to be at 3. And I know when I plug in 2, the y value will be 9. It's just the way it's going to be. You can plug it in if you want to and check the math, but it's going to work out. Next example, I finally got a full quadratic here, where I have a b and a c. I have a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 2, c is 5. So for my y-intercept, plug 0 in for x, which is going to give me 5. So my y-intercept is at 0, 5. And remember, the previous two problems, the y-intercept and the vertex, were the same point. That's not always the case. The y-intercept is just the point that your parabola is crossing the y-axis, okay? It's not always going to be the vertex. But here, so our y-intercept is 0, 5. Our axis of symmetry, I need to do negative b over 2a. So that gives me negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is at negative 1. Remember, my axis of symmetry is also h of my vertex, or the x value. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it into my quadratic. And that will give me negative 1, 4. So my vertex is at negative 1, 4. Like I said earlier, you want to plot the two x values to the right of the vertex and the two x values to the left of your vertex. Well, you already have the value one, or the point that's one spot from your vertex on there. That's your y-intercept at 0, 5. So negative 2 is also going to be 5. But next I'm going to plug in 1. I'll plug in 1. That'll give me a y value of 8, so my next point's at 1, 8. And because 1 was at 8, I know that negative 3 will also be at 8. So from there I get my parabola. Alright, tell you can find the following information. So for the y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x. It's going to be what c is, okay? It's going to be what c is in my quadratic. My vertex, plug in the axis of symmetry, axis of symmetry is h of the vertex. So to get my vertex, I need to find h by doing negative b over 2a. Once I have h, I can plug that into my quadratic and it will give me k. Up versus down. There's a picture of what the axis of symmetry is. It splits your parabola in half. Up versus down. If a is positive, our parabola goes up. If a is negative, it goes down. If a is positive, we're going to have a minimum value because it's at the bottom of the parabola. If a is negative, we'll have a maximum value because it is at the top of the parabola. Okay. So our max and min value is k of the vertex, or whatever that y value is. K of the vertex. Our next, jump into 6.6, it works together, talking about vertex form. Okay, vertex form. Right here, so we have two forms of vertex form. We have y minus k equals a x minus h squared, or y equals a x minus h squared plus k. All it is taking k in the first form and adding it to the right side. Okay. Either way is fine. Okay, let me clean that up a little bit. Sorry. So we got first example, y minus 3 equals negative 2 x plus 1 squared. So if you look at our formula, a is going to tell us whether it's up or down. So a is negative 2 in example 1. So since it's negative, our parabola is going down. Our axis of symmetry, we're not doing negative b over 2a because it's not in quadratic form. Our axis of symmetry is just going to be h of the vertex. So if you look at your formula, it's x minus h squared. So in this case, it has x plus 1 squared. Well, since that's a plus 1, that means h is actually negative 1 because it's minus a negative, which is making it a positive. So my vertex is going to be negative 1, 3. We get all this. We don't have to do any work. We're just identifying the formula, pulling everything out. Since our formula is minus k, well, minus k would be minus 3. All right, max versus min. Since our parabola is going down, we're going to have a max value. And our max value is always k of the vertex. So I've plotted my vertex at negative 1, 3. Alright, I've plotted it at negative 1, 3. And then just like I did before, I need to plug in the two x values to the right of the vertex, two x values to the left. Well, first, I'm going to plug 0 in for x. Do that. 1 squared is 1. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Plus 3 gives me 1, so I have a point at 0, 1. So that means that negative 2 will also be 1. Then I'm going to plug in 1 for x in my vertex form. That gives me negative 5. So conversely, that means that negative 3 will also be negative 5. Now I have my parabola. Example number 2. got my direction. Well, A is a positive 2, so that means it goes up. Axis of symmetry is the same thing as h of the vertex, so that will be a positive 1. My vertex will be 1 and then negative 3. Since this is plus 3, that means it's minus a negative 3, and that's why it's positive. So since my parabola is going up, I'm going to have a min value. My min value is always k of the vertex, so it's negative 3. So my vertex is at 1, negative 3. If I didn't point this out good enough earlier, the vertex is the point that the parabola starts from. Okay? So now I need to plug in the 2 values to the right of the vertex, 2 values to the left of the vertex. First, I'm going to plug in 2 for x. Plug in 2, and that will give you negative 1. So that means 0 is also negative 1. Then I plug in 3. Work that out. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract 3, and you get 5. So we got 3, 5. So that means negative 1 will also be 5. Then we have our parabola. All right. Last, converting to vertex form. We're going to convert to vertex form by completing the square. But right now, we're just going to do it a more simple way until we get to completing the square later in chapter 6. So, if my formula is y equals a x minus h squared plus k, well, I just need to find my h and k. A is already given. In this problem, a is 1. Okay. I'm going to get h. I'm going to do negative b over 2a. So that'll be negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. And then if I plug that into my quadratic, I'll have a negative 5 squared plus 10 times negative 5 plus 19. So it gives me 25 minus 50 plus 19. That gives me negative 25 plus 19, negative 6. So that's k. So I've got a, I've got h, and k, which is negative 5, negative 6. So my vertex form, if I just plug that into that formula right here, that will be y equals, the 1 is understood, x plus 5 squared minus 6. Okay. So for b, again, a is given. It's 1. Negative b over 2a gives me 2 over 2, which is 1. It's h. Then to get k, I plug 1 back in. 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 3. And that would give me 1 minus 2 is negative 1 plus 3 is 2. That's k. So I can use all that to get y equals, a equals 1, so that's understood. X minus 1 squared plus 2. Last, again, a is 1 given there. Negative b over 2a gives me 12 over 2, which is 6. That's h. And you get k, I'm going to plug 6 in. 6 squared minus 12 times 6 minus 30. Alright, that gives me negative 66, which is k. So my vertex form would be y equals, again, the a is understood because it's 1, x minus 6 squared